Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, where we come to transform ourselves and each other and the world. We are planted on the unceded land of the Ramaytush and Tamien people, and we pledge to join them whenever they ask us for solidarity, not just on this weekend of Indigenous Peoples Day, but at all times. We thank the past, present, and future generations of the Tamien and Ramaytush communities for their stewardship of the land where we now gather. I encourage you to have your video on throughout the service if you are comfortable with that. Usually we keep our audio off, but let's all unmute for a few moments to say hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
My friends.
Good
Hi.
Hey,
morning.
John.
Christy.
Your faces, hello.
Hi, Mary.
Hi there.
Good morning, everyone.
You can see the order of service by following the link in the chat. And once again, we have lots of people to thank. Let's look at who they are today.
UUCPA, we're gonna let it shine. UUCPA, we're gonna let it shine. UUCPA, we're gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Care for others' needs, yes! We're gonna let it shine. Care for others' needs, yes. We're gonna let it shine. Care for others' needs, yes. We're gonna let it shine. 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 Let it shine.
There are many other announcements of things coming up today and later this week in the order of service, so do make sure you have a look before you sign off today. For example, if you have recently started attending UUCPA and have questions, or long ago started attending UUCPA and have questions, or you just want to connect with others, including me, about your spiritual journey, I hope you will join me for Discovering UUCPA at 1 online this afternoon. The link is there in your order of service. And now, let us begin our service.
Wake up, 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 wake up. Greta wakes up the world, yeah. Greta wakes up the world, yeah. Greta wakes up the world, yeah. Greta wakes up the world, wake up, wake up. Greta doesn't want your adulation. Greta wants your participation. Greta wakes up the world, yeah. Greta wakes up
If you have a chalice there with you, please light it along with me. For those who light a spark within us when our spirits have grown cold and shadowed, we give thanks. To those who seek a way and enough light to see by, we offer our flame. With our centering words each week, we draw on the many sources of our living tradition. Today's words are the poem Heart, Butte, Montana by M.L. Smoker. The unsympathetic wind, how she has evaded me for years now, leaving a guileless shell and no way to navigate. Once, when I stood on a plateau of earth, just at the moment before the dangerous, jutting peaks converged upon the sway of grasslands, I almost found a way back. There, the sky, quite possibly all the elements, caused the rock and soil and vegetation to congregate. Their prayer was not new, and so faint I could hardly discern. Simple remembrances, like a tiny syncopated chorus calling everyone home across 1,000 eastward miles, and what little wind was left at my back. I could not move, and then the music was gone. All that was left were the springtime faces of mountains gazing down, their last patches of snow luminous. I dreamed of becoming snowmelt, gliding down the slope of history and into the valley with the promise, an assurance, that there is always a way to become bird, tree, water again. As we follow the sound of the bell into silence, let us become centered and fully present in this place together. Let's join in as Bruce leads us in singing, Our World is One World.
Touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate, we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
We now turn our thoughts to the important events of our lives, which we wish this community to share. If you have a joy or a sorrow you would like me to speak this morning, you can send your joys and sorrows to joyconcern@uucpa.org or post them in the chat box provided by Zoom, and they will be shared aloud. If you shared them earlier in the service, I've just signed on, so I won't see them, so do post them again. But I think most people are probably starting to post them right now. Then let us take a few moments of silent prayer and meditation to hold all that we've heard. Imagine that we can go with loved ones to the hospital, to memorial services, to celebrations, and then know that we can go, sending our love, our concern, our spirits with them, enriching everybody's lives by sharing these difficult and joyous experiences. Blessed be. Now let's join in as Bruce leads us in singing Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
There is not a reading this morning. That's just my way of keeping our crew on their toes. So now we will hear our choir sing a beautiful anthem, Blue-Green Hills of Earth.
For
This service is not about plastic. But first, I'm going to talk about plastic. We know plastic is a problem. We have built underground and above ground mountains of landfills that are mostly plastic. There's a floating clump of it the size of Texas. I can't even wrap my mind around driving across Texas. So now imagine something that large floating in the Pacific Ocean. Sea creatures entangle in our plastic and swallow it, and they suffocate and starve. And worse are the tiny particles, the microscopic but just as persistent bits that float in the water and imbue the soil and are found even in our blood. The health implications of all of this are still far from fully known. We created plastics because we wanted something light, resistant to breakage, transparent if necessary. It's incredibly varied in form and serves so many uses. It can be soft and flexible. It can be suitable for forming a part of the human body. It can be strong enough to build cars and houses. It's very useful stuff. Unfortunately, the very same qualities that make it useful make it hard to get rid of. And ubiquitous. Much plastic that comes into our lives cannot even be recycled. Then again, recycling itself is energy intensive and polluting, and most plastic that is labeled recyclable ends up in landfills or on the side of the road or in our soil or in our waterways. And so, our congregation, UUCPA's Green Sanctuary Committee, drafted a policy. We would do what we could with the small patch of earth for which we are responsible. Think globally, act locally. And by the way, if you want a way to think globally and act locally with this exact group of people, they meet today. They meet on the second Saturday each month at 12:30 online. There's a link right there in your order of service to join the meeting today. Although I think they're not so much talking about the issue of the plastics policy that I'm about to bring up. But not today, but they're going to get to it soon. So let me tell you a little bit about that process, which again, is not only about plastic. So the Green Sanctuary Committee, having the job of thinking about how can we have less of an impact on our environment, especially in the realm of energy, but in all sorts of ways, they saw single-use plastic as a problem that maybe we could tackle in one way. So they drafted a policy. They sent it to the board to review and think through, and the board said, let's see, well, we can see a few tweaks we might make, and here's a major question. How will it be for Thatcher, our most long-time and most important renter, the daycare that lives here all through the week? Will they be able to do this, especially in COVID time? We want to make sure they're on board. Talk to Thatcher. Thatcher said, hey, we love it. We really try to reduce single-use plastic. And yes, during COVID, it's very difficult. There are some things that simply come, as we all know, wrapped in one disposable piece of plastic, so we just can't avoid that. But we will do our best, and thanks so much for leading this way. We'll pass it on to our parents. So great. We said, sure, we'll work with you during COVID. We understand. The board sent it back to Green Sanctuary. Green Sanctuary tweaked it some, and it went into effect last month. There is no single-use plastic on our campus. We're not to bring it onto our campus or use it. It's been great for me. It's a reminder to use my thermos, for example, instead of when I go and get a coffee, getting a piece of plastic that's going to get thrown out a few minutes later. This has plastic in it too, but mostly it's not, and it's going to last for years and years. But also right away we discovered how hard it was to honor this simple policy. Last week I talked about how nothing is unconnected. Well, plastic seems to be one of those things that just runs through our lives in so many ways and informs all our decisions. We started this policy during the month that Hotel de Zinc was here, people sleeping right here in our main hall, and members of our congregation bringing them dinner each night. So the question arose, could we bring a chicken from Costco? You know, it comes in a big plastic container. Not in keeping with the policy. Could we bring a dish covered in plastic wrap? That's single use. Juice in a bottle? Or how about milk in a carton, which is compostable here in Palo Alto, but comes with a plastic cap? No good. It's really hard to adhere to this policy. Even when you remember things like, oh, I'm doing takeout, tell the restaurant, please don't put any utensils in the bag. I don't need them. I'm taking the food to a church which has metal, rewashable, many times reusable forks, knives, and spoons. It was a lot harder than that. So we'll keep considering, how are we going to do this? We've already done some compromising, as with COVID, as with the realization that things are especially hard for people who are homeless, who do not have the resources of reusable items that people have who live in permanent homes. And this policy has already caused us to change some of our behavior. Not just me remembering to bring my thermos every time, but we've gone to some trouble to make city water available to the people who are now going to be living here in the safe parking program. We want to be able to tell them, you don't need to bring bottled water. We will have safe water for you. And hey, we have good city water. It's good to drink. So those are some changes that have already been driven by this policy. That's excellent. If we can't completely avoid single-use plastic, this policy has already had one excellent effect. It has made us aware of just how ubiquitous single-use plastic is. Now, we have a few things we can do when we discover something like that. A policy on the one hand and a real difficulty in actually carrying it out. Oh, I thought of another one since I wrote this down. We could lie. We could say, oh yeah, I'm not bringing single-use plastic, and stick it into the recycling or the garbage. We're not going to do that. We can give up. We can just say, this just can't be done. Roll back the policy. It's not going to work. We can feel guilty. Such a simple thing we're being asked to do, and we can't seem to change our habits. Or we can realize that changing individual habits is not enough. And I am so grateful to the Green Sanctuary Committee and our board and this policy for giving us that message so clearly. We're getting closer to what this sermon is about. We are soaked in individualism. As products of the Enlightenment, both our country and this religious tradition put a very high value on individual liberty, individual rights, the sacredness of the individual conscience. And we were absolutely right to do so. Not only to break free of tyranny, but to take responsibility for our choices, our actions. We must uphold the integrity of the individual. And, like plastic, individualism can be toxic. Useful, but also sometimes dangerous. One of the results of this individualism and the high focus that we have brought to it for 250 years is that we have forgotten so much about interdependence. We've forgotten how intertwined we are. We tend to look only to individual problems and individual solutions. We look only to individual solutions to corporate problems. We forget how to organize corporate responses. And I'm meaning this in at least two senses of the word. Corporate as in a corporation, the businesses that produce and send so much plastic our way, and also the sense of doing something as one body, working together, because we created these problems together. And then we try to put it on individuals to fix. Is this by design or by accident? Yes. The episode Throughline, which, by the way, Ryan Holmes of UUCPA put me on to, wonderful history podcast that is produced by National Public Radio. There is a one episode which I strongly recommend you listen to in completely or read it. You can read the transcript as well on npr.org, called The Litter Myth. Talks about this problem, the plastic piece of the problem. So somebody they had on Throughline is named Heather Rogers, and she noted, if you're walking down the street today and somebody throws a wrapper on the sidewalk, people feel no reservations about telling that person that they should pick up that wrapper and put it in the garbage can. And we're not saying, why is there a wrapper? Why is there this wrapper that can be thrown away? We're saying this person's a bad guy, which is really profound. You know, she says, yeah, it's better to recycle some things than throw them away. But again, it just takes us away from the deeper question that's really going to address the amount of pollution and waste that we're creating, which is, what are the decisions that manufacturers are making? Why are they making those? And what kinds of changes can we implement that will alter how they're using materials and how they're polluting? Those are the questions that we need to be asking and answering. As environmentalists, we urge individual action. It's important, right? Drive a more efficient car. Turn off the water while you brush your teeth and collect the shower water as it's heating up. Put it in your garden. Don't buy bottled water. All good. And yet, too often we don't see the larger picture, that we could drive less. We could drive individual cars much, much less if we built excellent transit. Just look at the places that have done it. We don't see that the water saved during toothbrushing and shower water heating is a drop in the bucket compared to the industrial uses of water, driven by the things that we buy and use, but invisible to us most of the time. And as for that bottle in the fridge, well, Throughline has some more to say about that. But I want to offer some of the ways that we could be thinking about putting individual power into corporate action. For example, some of our grocery stores have compostable bags in the produce section now. That could happen even more if we suggested it and went to companies, went to grocery stores and said, what would it take for you to do that? Presumably, you haven't done it yet, even though you're aware of the possibility, because it's expensive. How much more expensive? How can we support you in making this change? We could ask the companies that we support what they would need to do in order to reduce packaging, which is one of the biggest sources of plastic in our waste stream. Say we loved to buy computers that are wrapped in recyclable or compostable items. Could you make it not plastic at all? Here's how we could help you do that. Or Here's some corporate action. We could back legislation that requires manufacturers of computers, of other appliances, of cars, to take them back and dispose responsibly of the plastic that are in them. Not to be punitive. This isn't because the manufacturers are bad people, but problem solving, saying, when I have this car and it's ready to go to the junkyard, I don't know what to do with these great big pieces of plastic. They're not recyclable. The junkyard can't do anything with them. Maybe if the manufacturers were responsible for doing something with them, they would say, oh, this is the kind of plastic we need to use. We need to use recyclable plastic, or we will use something different entirely. We'll find another solution because we're not just passing the problem along. But I said I'd get back to that bottle in the fridge. On Throughline, they asked, what about the 1940s, the 1950s? How did people eat and drink things then? Well, Heather Rogers says, and some of you will remember this, you would drink your soda or your beer, your milk, and then take the bottle back to the store, or the milk delivery person would pick it up, back up the next day from your doorstep or whatever, and that was the norm. And after World War II, you just have this rush of consumption and this massive capacity for manufacturing. There's this one plastics industry conference, she says, I think it was in 1956, and one of the speakers at the conference looks out at the crowd, at all the plastics manufacturers in the room, and he says to them, your future is in the garbage wagon. There's this real consciousness. If we can get people to throw things away, they will buy more stuff. Now again, it's not like manufacturers suddenly became evil in 1950. The whole system changed so that it became cheaper, easier, more convenient in many, many ways for people to produce plastic, to give us our juice in bottles we would then throw away, to give us straws that have a useful life of 5 to 20 minutes, not even averaging in the zero of the straw that goes straight from the manufacturer into the bag where you don't use it because you don't like straws, and then into the waste stream. If we're going to change the system so that it no longer makes sense for people to make these kinds of decisions, it makes sense for them to make the environmental decisions, we need to remember that we're not just individuals. We can work together. We need to work together, because by the time it gets to one person's decision, the end user's decision, there aren't very many good choices. This sermon is not about plastic. This sermon is about what happens when we come up against the realization that we don't have good choices. And I'm so grateful to the UUCPA plastics policy for bringing us right up to it, so our noses touch it. It blocks our way. Even though it's often invisible, with this policy we come up right against it, and we cannot ignore the fact that it's there, that it's blocking us from doing what we want to do. And we sit there in Costco and we say, how can I do this? I don't have any good choices. In the classic novel, A Wrinkle in Time, Meg Murray is searching for her father who disappeared mysteriously. If this is new information for you, you should go read the book. But for now, I'll fill you in. When she finds him, he's imprisoned in a clear column, which is in a small room. She rushes at him, but, here I'm quoting from the book, when she reached what seemed to be the open door, she was hurled back as though she had crashed into a brick wall. Like the column itself, the room and what appeared to be a doorway into the room is transparent but solid. Meg is able to get into the room and into the column itself by putting on glasses that show the material as it really is. It rearranges before her eyes, making a way forward. In the column, it turns out, her father perceives only darkness. Once he puts on the glasses, he too can see that he is imprisoned within a clear material, smooth and solid, but it yields before the transformative lenses, the ones that see it as it is. I'm not talking about plastic. I'm talking about those moments when we see the structures that we, or people long ago and far away, have built, and that give us too few choices, that present us with, well, I can bring these folks dinner, or I can refrain from using single-use plastics. Well, I can drive a car to work and burn fossil fuels or use a lot of resources, or I can take a job right by where I live. Instead of offering a third choice. I want a third choice. I want a transit system that gets us where we need to go, so much more efficiently than cars. I want packaging that isn't made of stuff that you immediately throw away, that has a life of a few minutes or a few days. We see these structures when we put on these lenses of, I'm not just an individual, and I'm being asked as an individual to act as if that's all I've got, as if I'm not part of a body. This plastics policy is one of those spiritual gifts that helps us do the spiritual work of realizing we have a whole different kind of power than the power to just pick up our wrapper and put it in the trash. That's important. Do that. Don't put your wrapper on the ground, okay? And if it's a recyclable piece of plastic, we'll recycle it. But we can do so much more when we realize we're not just individuals. That attitude of individualism is misdirection. It's causing us to look away from the real problem and from the solutions to our real problems. And it's causing us to feel lonely and helpless and guilty and scared, instead of like the powerful beings we are, the powerful beings who created plastic and created these systems by which we interlock our lives. We can use them. We just need to practice, and we need to see that they're there, that they're a possibility. As I said last week, quoting Swedenborg, nothing unconnected ever occurs. There's nothing unconnected. We are all woven together. Our lives affect one another. And the decisions made long ago, before maybe you were born at a plastics manufacturer's conference, are affecting us. But we are all together here in this world. And if we respond to each no-win decision by saying, why are these my choices? Why must I deal with this as an individual? And we look outside ourselves and we see what it's all made of, then amazing things happen. We have so much more power. Our world becomes so much more beautiful and more sustainable and more healthful and healthy, and it also becomes so much bigger. Now, in gratitude for our interdependence and for this congregation when it helps us to know that we are not separate at all, but that we are connected and able to do together, to see together what must be done and what there is to see. Now please join in as Bruce leads us in singing, "We Are Building a New Way." See, we wouldn't want to miss out on singing together or even singing separately. And now may we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality.
In a dark time, when fear and confusion reign, and hatred casts a shadow on the stage, a power play. So easy to despair, but we don't have time to waste. We will not be silent. We'll fight like a girl. All over the world we rise. Together we rise. We the people stand united against the hate. We the people say no, 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 not in my name. We flood the streets with cardboard signs as millions of lifted voices cry. No hate, no fear, refugees are welcome here. No war, no ban, yes, we still can. My body, my choice, better listen to my voice. And Black Lives Matter. Girls just wanna have fundamental rights. Don't you think it's time to stop being so polite? I'm gonna be the change I want to see in this land. From Jacksonville to Ketchikan. From 7 continents and 50 divided states. Left to right, we all know something's wrong. Come join our song. With the whole world watching, our differences are our strengths. No human is illegal. Stay focused and strong. Everybody belongs. We rise. Together we rise. We the people. Nasty women and our friends. We the people. Show up, dive in, persevere to the end. With kindness and generosity, build bridges of hope and liberty. Listen to the wisdom of the First Nations. Climate change is real. Stand up for education. A woman's place is in this revolution. Never surrender. Respect my existence or expect resistance. And keep your mitts off my lady bits. Our rights are not up for grabs, and neither are we. Equality, equality for girls to the front. Time to get information. If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. We love, not hate, makes America great. We rise, we the people. We will not be silenced. We the people. Together, together. We stand persevere. We rise.
Thank you, Ruth. Please do stay after the benediction for our virtual coffee time. You will be invited to small group conversations in our breakout rooms. Here in the main room is where we talk about the topic of the service. So if that's what's on your mind, please do stay here and we'll discuss it. You should be able to move between breakout rooms on your own, although it always depends on how Zoom is playing for you. And the rooms will stay open for about half an hour. Now, please unmute yourself, turn on your video, and you can touch hands virtually like this. You can put a hand on your heart and reach out to others like that while we say our benediction together.
Go out.
Out
Go out
into
the world
into
in
the
peace.
world in peace. Be of good courage.
Go out,
Into the
world,
world in
And
peace.
press
what
to
is
what is
good.
good.
Hold
of
good
good
courage.
courage.
As to what is evil.
Evil,
No one
Defend the faint-hearted,
to the faint-hearted.
break the
Break
weak,
the weak,
The weak,
stand the faint,
the suffering,
rejoice in
rejoice in
beauty,
beauty,
Word and deed.
rejoice
For all
rejoice in
honor
beauty,
all beings,
speak love,
Make love,
word and
word,
deed.
and deed.
honor
Honor
all beings.
Amen. And
Amen.
so it is.
Blessed be.
Blessed be.